Good evening. I'll call to order the September 26, 2022 workshop of the Arvada City Council. And Person Rush, we'll do a roll call.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
Councilmember
Here.
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 Mr. Pfeiffer.
I move to excuse Councilmember Smith from tonight's workshop.
All votes are cast. Mr. Jones, how do you vote?
Yes.
Everyone else votes yes as well. Lisa Smith is an excused absence tonight. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to begin our workshop session with a presentation on the proposed budget. We have our Director of Finance, Brian Archer, who is actually running a little late. He should be here in about the next 20 minutes or so. So we're going to go ahead and start without him and at least cover the introductory portions of the presentation right now, if that's okay with the council.
You bet.
All right. So next slide. So we wanted to, as articulated in the budget letter that we presented with the proposed budget, we wanted to talk a lot about how we interpreted the themes and the issues that were before us as we put together the proposed 2023-2024 budget. And one of the things that we have determined as we went through the critical decisions associated with the pandemic was we articulated a set of principles that began with people first, where we will endeavor to maintain public service levels and avoid significant impacts to our entire city team, including furloughs, compensation reductions, and layoffs. Basically putting the citizens of Arvada as well as our employees as the first rung of what we would look at making decisions around. The next issue associated with the budget is the fact that we had significant and emerging priorities that were taking place at the time that we were putting the budget together. In fact, even before we started putting the budget together, back around October or so of 2021 and going into 2022. We saw that we had additional revenue growth, and based on current trends, we felt we would be able to address some of the higher priority needs by making immediate changes to the current budget. And that resulted in the addition of 27 positions mid-cycle that began from October 21 to July of 2022 that we approved in order to address operational changes. We also did that to support and improve the execution of capital projects, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from our infrastructure team as we present the major changes in each of the budgets. We also wanted to advance 2021 strategic plan initiatives that we felt we needed additional resources in order to move those forward. And then we also wanted to address the emerging priorities that have been included in the recently approved 2022 strategic plan, specifically emphasis on housing, emphasis on sustainability. We also had the emerging issues associated with homelessness, with changes in our park system, public safety, and then, as I said earlier, capital projects drove some additional positions in engineering and utilities. And you'll hear more about that again when our leaders from the different work systems present information regarding their budget. We've also proposed 15 new positions for the 2023-2024 budget, and these positions will, if approved, address an expanded capital program focusing on transportation and utilities infrastructure. We added in our 10-year financial plan, or projecting to add in our 10-year financial plan on the capital side, about $330 million worth of capital projects. Most of that is within our utilities infrastructure. You guys have been looking at that with the master plans that have been presented over the last few months. But we're also, again, focusing on transportation. Also, the timely maintenance of our city facilities. We added some positions in the area of custodial services. We also took a hard look, and you've heard from our Information Technology Director, Craig Poley, we took a hard look at cybersecurity and determined that we needed additional resources there. Some of that we added with contract resources, but we're also proposing a position that's dedicated totally to cybersecurity in order to maintain our security profile in that area. Our neighboring city to the south has been impacted by a cyber attack. So these are things that are present on our mind as we look at these kinds of issues. The other thing that drove our budget was compensation increases. I'm quite sure that the City Council is aware, as really almost everyone is, about the impacts of the Great Resignation. We experienced that last year in 2021. Some of it, frankly, was contributed by the loss of Gordon Beasley, Officer Gordon Beasley, last summer, in which, and that combined with the continuing national narrative regarding policing did cause us to lose 37 individuals from the Arvada Police Department, and we still have approximately 30 of our 191 sworn positions that have been vacant for much of this year. We took that issue head on, and we worked with our PD and our finance team, City Manager's office, to restructure the pay range to add an additional step, as well as premium pay for our police officers, something that was brought up before, to recognize their bachelor degree educational requirement, which provided an additional 4% for most of our officers with that change in compensation. And then last month, our Human Resources team shared the results of the annual market benchmark study for all jobs in the city's pay plan to determine how salaries have changed in the market year over year. And what we found was that salaries have moved an average of 6% for all job families, with the exception of the executive job family, which moved more aggressively at a rate of 15 to 18%. So we had to look at this data and determine how we are going to respond in order to retain our employees, who have been leaving their jobs for a variety of reasons, and we wanted to see what we could do to stem that tide. Our turnover peaked at 17.7% in 2021. That is almost unheard of for Arvada. I think as most of you that have been on the council for a long time know, that we retain our employees, and we've had turnover rates in the single digits most of the time. Just this last week, we honored, and I believe you will see this person honored in front of the City Council at some point, we honored Craig Smith, a 50-year employee. He started with us in 1972 at the age of 18. And when I got here 10 years ago, it was not unusual for us to see 40, 45-year employees that were staying with us. And that is changing. I think part of that is generational, but again, I think we had to respond. We couldn't live with a 17.7% turnover rate, so we had to respond with another strategy. We obviously were trying to recruit people, but 22% of our vacancies currently that we have remain unfilled. So after checking with the market, other local government employers, we proposed and discussed with you all, the City Council, the implementation of a 3% increase retroactive to August 1st, instead of waiting for the planned date of January 1st, and then another 3% increase in January of 2023. This is essentially a 6% increase over the course of about 4 months for our team. That is going to cost us an additional $2 million, almost a little over $2 million for the remainder of 2022 and 2023, and then another $13 million to our 10-year financial models for all funds based on current assumptions. The good news is that approximately 80% of that cost will be funded and supported by projected vacancy savings, salary vacancy savings, and then lower health insurance costs. I think, as the council knows, we experienced another year of 0% increase in our health insurance, which is phenomenal. It's really something that is a tribute to our employees being engaged, as well as the fact that we do a pretty darn good job of managing it, and the credit goes to Finance and Human Resources for doing so. The other thing that we wanted to continue to focus on is the compliance with our City Council budget and fiscal policy. All of the 10-year models in our financial plan are balanced except for the Parks Fund. And the reason for that is the taking on of the additional field scheduling, adding positions to address the safety issues that we uncovered when we did the investigation of the accident we had with the result in the loss of Joseph Heron last summer. We determined that part of that had to do with workload and capacity, and the ability for our Parks team members to be able to focus on safety training. So the addition of those positions helps with that. And we believe that we can work through the issues with our Parks Fund. It will take some work, and we'll have to look at where we can identify additional revenue sources and/or service level reductions that make sense. But we have some time for that. I believe the fund starts to go upside down somewhere around 2026. So we have some time to work through that, and we believe we can. And certainly, we would have to bring options to the City Council at some point as we do that. We've also maintained our contributions to internal service funds. Now, one of the things that you will hear tonight when Lori closes out the comments with the budget presentation is a focus around our financial resiliency and how we're going to address that. And the internal service funds are part of that discussion. We're not quite where we need to be, we believe, with all of our internal service funds. However, we've made improvements. We've improved the contributions, and we still have work to do, but we're definitely on the right track in terms of making sure that those funds are adequately funded in order to replace and deal with all of our assets. So with that, we have presented to you a balanced budget for 2023-2024, and with the exception of the Parks Fund, balanced throughout the 10-year financial planning area. We did include some reflection and some, if you could go to the next slide, sorry. We are maintaining our connection, resourcing the strategic plan with our proposed budget. We do see the potential for a future recession, and we're acknowledging that, understanding that that is something that is potentially on the horizon. However, what we've determined from talking to and reading about this issue and looking at what economists are saying, that we believe the current economy will remain relatively strong throughout 2022 and into 2023. We see some cooling occurring in 2023, later in 2023 and into 2024, and we believe if there is a recession, it would not have a significant impact on us until 2025. And again, I think 10-year financial planning helps us with that. If we've adjusted our assumptions in the later years, going into 2025 and beyond, regarding revenues and expenditures, and we should be fine unless, of course, something more significant occurs. And then again, with our 10-year financial planning, we have the fund balance to be able to generate a smooth landing, if you will, if we were to deal with something that was more significant. We have, of course, issues on the horizon regarding unfunded mandates. I mentioned the Apex field scheduling transition, capital projects. We have somewhere in the vicinity of about $800 million of capital projects that are unprioritized right now. We show them in our capital plan, but we do not have them actually funded or projected to be funded at any time during the 10-year plan. We're working on our deficit in the area of street maintenance. We're not quite there yet. And of course, you'll remember that we presented to you the ADA transition plan, and we identified approximately $200 million worth of work that needs to be done. That's work that we're chipping away at with things like disabled ramps on our streets, and also whenever we make improvements to our buildings, we're addressing accessibility issues there. But we certainly would love to see a more sustained approach to addressing those areas, and that's something that we'll be looking for as well. So with that, we are presenting to you this budget. I want you to go to the next slide. Brian here yet? Okay. So we'll very quickly run through the highlights of the budget. Some of them were referred to already, but our compensation increases, as we said, 3% in August and another 3% in January. Healthcare, 0% for the fourth year in a row. Again, that's almost unheard of certainly in most employment situations. Good news, there is additional $1.55 million of highway user transit funds. That's not the right name.
Trust fund.
Trust fund, thank you. Who said that? Was that you, Mayor? Thank you. Highway user trust funds, which will increase our streets funding to, I believe it's over $11 million a year in 2023, and then we're going to edge close by 2024 to about $12 million a year. So that's good news that we're putting all of that into our annual street maintenance program. In parks, we talked about the funding gap that we had there. We transferred $900,000, an additional $900,000 from the general fund to help close that funding gap that's proposed as part of this budget. We have capital needs, $6 million for our evidence storage building and $2.8 million for radio replacement. So these are things that we need to deal with that support our safe community work system and priority area. And then internal service funds, $1.8 million in ongoing funding. As I said, that's something that will likely need to be increased in future years, but it's still a pretty significant commitment to keep our assets up and running and replaced when needed. And then finally, in our water and wastewater master plans, we've included funding for phase 1 of the implementation. And again, that's something that we have discussed with you during previous council workshops. So with that, we are ready to present the 2023-2024 proposed biennial operating and capital budget, starting with community and economic development. And you can see Ryan is right there ready to get started.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for allowing me to present the community and economic development budget. I am going to go fast through this just in the interest of time. However, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. From a revenue perspective, we are on track. In fact, we are going to be a little bit above our revenue projections, which is a good thing. One of the main reasons for that is that we just got the check from the Morgan residential development, which was rather large and is going to allow us to exceed these revenue projections. From an expenditure area, we are on track. The one thing that you will note on this is that the the expenditures have gone up in 2023. However, that's because of the inclusion of the housing division that is part of CED now. They came over about mid-year and is now included in our budget. What are the things that we are asking for and are new to this budget? So as City Council is aware, we are creating a housing advisory committee. We're going to be back on October 10th to be talking about housing in general. But one of the key components of that and being able to staff that is a housing development supervisor or specialist. And so that was the mid-year addition of that position. That position has not been hired yet. We are going to go through a housing workshop, which some members of council are going to be a part of in October. That's going to allow us to get some of our ducks in a row and really implement our housing strategy with the assistance of this person. Next are some other...
Ryan, can I just interrupt you quickly on that one? Do you feel confident there's enough work for a full-time, all-in $140,000 employee to do? Like, or if there's not, are there other tasks to which this person can be directed to get full value out of it?
So that's a great question, and I've been thinking about that question as well. I do believe that there will be enough work for this person to do, and I think part of that is going to be what are we going to be developing out of this housing strategy. So there's a lot of work that we need to do in order to associate what are our goals, and it's difficult to answer that question directly without understanding what we're going to be asking this person to do. But this person is absolutely going to be overseeing the Housing Advisory Committee, working on updating a housing strategic plan in partnership with that committee and in partnership with City Council, and then implementing that plan, particularly from a development side of things, which is not something that we've typically done in the city. And so what are those strategies and what are those things that we're going to do are kind of TBD. And so we're going to have that. But let me also say that if for some reason that fills up 75% of the FTE. There are so many priorities, as Mr. Devon just kind of laid out, even with CED, that bringing this skill set into our workforce will be advantageous to us for us to be strategic in the long term.
Okay, thank you.
So other additions that are proposed in this budget are three things. One of them is we've had so much work in our economic development house over the past couple of years, and really our economic development team in AIDA has been losing FTEs over the past couple of years. I used to be only part of AIDA. Now that I've taken on a larger role, I don't do as much day-to-day economic development things. That takes away from the FTEs. And then also our communications person, Allison Tremblay, she would split things up or only work for AIDA, and now she's doing things for community and economic development as well as AIDA. So we needed, because of the extraordinary amount of work, needed to put that senior economic development specialist back in. But in order to help offset that, we are providing back to the city some of the temp wages that we've been using in order to fill that gap. So while you see an increase of $130,000, we're offsetting that by an annual cost of $60,000. The other thing, the $50,000 going up, is part of our moving to online with a lot of our permits. It's been really efficient, it's been really good for us, but we pay credit card fees on all that. So one of the challenges is that as we get more revenue coming in through credit cards, we have to pay more fees in order to be able to accept those payments online. So that $50,000 is to help offset that.
Can I have a question about that?
Yes, sir.
Don't we charge the fees back to the person using the card, or we decided not to do that?
Philosophically, we have decided not to do that dating back, because if we do it for one, we have to do it for all, so we have to look at this holistically across the city. And when we went to, and Sharon and Brian Archer, when he gets here, can talk about this, but when we went to online billing for water utilities, there was a philosophy there that we wanted to encourage people to move to the online, and so we weren't charging the fees. And so that set up the rest of the city to also have to not be able to charge the fees, and so we reimburse them back. It is buttoned up back into the fees that we charge, but it's a more indirect line of sight in that than what this is. So we've talked about changing that moving forward, but that's still something that we're in conversation
So it
about.
goes into the overhead of
Yes.
the service. Okay, yeah, because other government, they'll charge you that $3 fee or $2 fee when you do your
Correct.
license plates online. Or.
Correct.
But if we have it in the overhead, I just think we should capture that somewhere in the transaction.
Understood.
But if it's in the overhead, I'm good with it.
All right. So one of the things that we don't generally or haven't done in the past, but we wanted to show you how we are stewards of these funds and how we're making tough decisions every day, especially working through this budget process. This is a list of the things that the Community and Economic Development work system asked for, but they were not able to be funded because of the other priorities that Mr. Devon has listed. Of note, the city's comprehensive plan is something that we generally update every 10 years. It doesn't mean that we don't have a comprehensive plan that we shouldn't still be following, this year or next year. But what we'd like to do is have an updated community conversation about that. And because we don't have the funding at this time for it, that will need to be pushed into the future, and we'll continue to use our existing comprehensive plan. Other things like the Track It system, which is our online building permit, right-of-way permit system, is not meeting our needs for customer service as well as we believe it could. And so we are considering being able to replace that. But it is operating for us. And so while it's not the highest and most efficient system that we can use, it's not the highest priority right now relative to the other things that we have going on. That planner one position kind of went hand in hand with the comp plan. That is a big deal to go through a comprehensive plan, and we didn't have the staffing resources, specifically given our development review challenges, not challenges, but an amount of development review cases, so we couldn't use our current planners to help with that effort. So that's why those are together. And then the last $30,000 is about our building inspectors are not, they don't go through the same process for their on-call work when they get on-called and have to go out to a house fire in the middle of the night or something like that. The system doesn't work the same as other on-call individuals in the city, and so what we're trying to do is just make the on-call system for different inspectors the same. It's just been done differently over the years, but in order to do that, we needed some additional funding to make it work. And right now, that's just not something that we can afford to do.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So this $250,000 for updating the city's comp plan that's not in the budget, so it sounds like then we're postponing updating the comp plan, and if so, until when?
Well, so it'll be on the one-time funds, is my understanding, and so we will see if we will be able to fund it through that mechanism. But again, that will go through an additional prioritization list, and we'll have to determine that. I will also say the $250,000 is just a 2023 portion of it. The entire cost of the comp plan redo is $500,000. We just split it up into 23 and 24, so you're seeing kind of the first half of it. It's about a 2-year process. When will it be postponed to? That will be dependent on the conversations that we have when we prioritize all these things going through the budget process annually. So we will ask for it. We will continue to ask for it, but it will have to be able to be prioritized based on all the other extraordinary needs that the city has.
So the 10-year timeline that we were on was for us to start working on it in 2023?
Yes, it was approved in 2014, and so if we worked on it in 2023, 2024, we may be able to approve it at the end of 2024, and we would be on that 10-year cycle. Not hitting it in 2023, right now I'd say we're pushed back 6 months, and we'll see what happens in the 1 year, or excuse me, in the one-time funding. But if it doesn't reach priority then maybe we look at it in the next budget process. So it'll come to these prioritizations that we need to look through. We just wanted to show you the things that we were pushing forward, but had to postpone because of the extraordinary needs that the city has.
No, understood. Thank you.
So my last slide is about what else do we need to know and looking forward. So a couple things. We're not sure what building is going to look like for the next 5 years. We're in kind of recessionary territory, and we will see how building starts work for us, which is a revenue generator. Also, at the end of 10 years, when we do the comp plan in the 2034 area, that comp plan is going to be basically identifying the build-out scenario. We don't want to necessarily wait for that. We have about 25 to 30 years left of growth before we kind of reach our build-out scenario relative to how we're right-sizing our infrastructure, how we're meeting our population growth levels, how we're working with our water supply, all of those things. So we're about 25 to 30 years. If you base the last 10 years or so of growth on what the future is going to look like. We have increased workload. We're seeing that a lot in our teams. We probably have 2 to 3 times the amount of development cases from the beginning of COVID until now. The one thing I will say is we are starting to see a slowdown of number of cases that are coming in. So we, knock on wood, are going to get caught up. And then the last thing that we just wanted to highlight, and this works better for the community and economic development system than it could for others, but people like being remote and they like that kind of hybrid system, and so we've been accommodating towards that. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Sharon Israel, and I'm available for questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm going to invite Jacqueline Rhodes to join me up here as well. Jacqueline's our city engineer, incoming public works director. And as you know, I'm your utilities director. We're going to tag team the infrastructure budget this evening. I was going to say next slide, but I've been trained to use the remote again. Okay, so here's an overview from the budget book of our past budget, current, future forecasted budget. Like Ryan, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly in the interest of time, so please stop me if you've got questions. One thing I want to point out here is you'll see a large jump between the 2022 revised and 2023 proposed budget. The lion's share of that is the $100 million bond issue that we're proposing and we'll be bringing to council October 17th for your consideration. Those bond issues, those bond funds would go toward reinvestment and capacity in our water and sewer systems. There's also a slight increase to the 2022 revenue because of one-time funds dedicated to streets maintenance. You can see here we've added quite a few FTE. I'm going to go through the mid-cycle FTE with you, as well as the proposed FTE for 2023. You're going to hear a theme here. It's a combination of increase of demand for service, like Ryan mentioned, and it's also a need to add technical staff so we can deliver on the capital projects and infrastructure that we've got programmed. So this slide is our mid-cycle infrastructure FTE additions. You can see several of these these lines are civil engineers we've added in utilities. As we've been discussing with council throughout the year around financial strategy for utilities, you may recall that these positions were needed so we can deliver on those reinvestment and capacity projects. Our Public Works Project Manager for facilities is also helping us with backlogs related to facilities reinvestment.
Hey Sharon, on the
Yes.
civil engineer 2 and 3, there's 2 of those positions for each,
That's right.
and they're each $141,000.
That's-
So it's actually $300,000 is what you need in costs for that.
That's right.
Okay.
And Councilmember Pfeiffer, you might recall that we've been purposely adding a number of engineers to our team. When I started here a little over 3 years ago, we saw the need to build that up so we could staff for these capital projects.
Are we having any luck filling those positions?
Great luck. Thank you. I actually just got to see the name of one of our brand new engineers who started today, Matthew Amade. Yeah, so we're attracting talent, and I'm gonna go off script here and say, talent attracts talent. And so as we've been adding some really incredible staff, many of whom you've heard talk about our utilities needs and infrastructure this year, we are building a reputation for a great team. Okay, so we've got some additional proposed positions. So again, the previous slide was mid-cycle additions. Again, the theme here is increased need for demand for service. So you see 2 custodian positions there at the top. I wanted to point out that this reduces the need we have for temporary, so there is some cost offset there. We've got 4 custodians covering 7 days a week, 16 hours per day. So those positions would help support
And that total
that work.
cost is for 2, so this is opposite of what the previous slide said.
Yes.
So
I
they're
apologize for that.
about $75,000 each.
Yes.
Where the other one is like, that was actually what they were each.
Yes.
140-some thousand. Okay. Okay.
Sorry for the confusion on that.
Okay. Thank you.
You can see here we're adding a couple of public works engineers as well, and then a number of folks who are going to be on our street maintenance team. There's also $1.5 million additional funds for streets maintenance here. You may know that I'm not a streets expert, but if you've got any streets questions, I can phone a friend. Okay, I'll keep moving on. I want to point out here, we've got a line item in here for the vehicles fund on CDL costs, so you may be aware that the CDL licensing rules changed this year, and so we ended up needing to outsource training for all of our new CDL drivers. So we've got a line item in that this year, a couple of them. You can see here there's the bond issue that we talked about for capital projects. In the water fund, we're adding a cybersecurity position. That's that ITCS security operations analyst. We're tracking a lot of activity related to cybersecurity issues, and this position will partner with the IT team to make sure that our control system for citywide infrastructure stays safe. A couple of highlights on this slide. I thought the water treatment chemicals might jump out at you. It's almost $300,000. Compared to last year, our chemicals are costing us about 30% more, depending on the chemical, than they did the previous year. Similarly, there's a line item for ongoing operations increased costs. We're seeing credit card charges, like Ryan talked about. We saw a $40,000 increase just in our Excel bill one year over the other. And replacement pipes and fittings, in some cases, are over 100% increased in cost. So we're looking for funds to pass that through, in addition to some of these reinvestment costs. I'm going to pass it on to Jacqueline. She's going to talk about the unfunded infrastructure requests that we had brought up during the budget cycle, what we thought we would share with you, and then wrap up. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Okay, well, thank you and good evening. I'll build on the themes that Ryan kicked off, that we're continuing to working hard to prioritize all of our requests, and I want to present the unfunded needs as a look into the future as we look towards a more resilient system. Some unfunded infrastructure requests to highlight here. I wanted to highlight the City Facilities Master Plan. We will be coming back later this year to present an update on all of our infrastructure work system master planning efforts, and that is one that we will be deferring. Other positions related here, more positions within the engineering team, so both a project manager for continued transportation-related projects and technicians to support the workload related to development and dry utilities process.
Let me interject here. When we talk about the cost of these employees, this isn't salary only. This is the full cost of bringing on an individual, so it's going to be benefits and
That's
I
correct.
assume equipment, things of that
The fully
nature.
loaded cost.
Okay,
Mhm,
fully
that's
loaded
correct.
cost. Because I was going to come out of retirement and try to become I think the traffic engineer is one that looks pretty promising.
That's correct. So on the next slide, as you speak about the traffic team, we do have some traffic operations and maintenance needs. These needs will continue to be refined into the future as we deliver the transportation system master system plan. This is just looking at continued operations planning implementation for all things traffic, signal, markings, signs, fiber, et cetera. I also wanted to highlight the Streets Maintenance Fund. So we'll be coming back later with more details on our pavement maintenance program, and I wanted to highlight that we continue to put forward what we believe is an achievable request, but one that will need to grow in the future. So the team is ready to present scenarios ranging from status quo to very aggressive options that we'd want to work with you on goals for ultimately maintaining our pavement.
So the snow and ice material that's unfunded, can you explain that since we're coming up into the winter seasons now?
That's correct. So in addition to implementing our streets maintenance plan, where we've looked at optimization of some of our program routes, this is right now a forecast of what inflation looks like for our materials. If this does come to fruition, we will be looking at reprioritizing other elements of the program to fund those needs.
Okay, so we have material already on order.
Correct.
That we could use, but this is based on, if I understood you correctly, just inflationary costs associated to that material.
That we're forecasting. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'll rob Peter to pay Paul if you have to get to that.
Correct.
Or you can come to council and ask for some contingency money that we'll just pull off the tree, the money tree. Does that work around here? We can blame Devin for everything after this next week too, so.
Thank you for queuing in on that one. You have it now.
Well, that one, if you're not prepared, then you just don't get the material. I mean, that's what's happening right now is material could be scarce fairly quick if you don't have orders in now. And so want to make sure we're prepared for that.
Our teams have been preparing. In fact, that started weeks ago. Don, would you like to speak to a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So we have actually filled our storage already.
Okay.
And we have contracts with providers that will be continuously shipping us materials. And as Jacqueline was talking about, this covers what we anticipate for greater material costs in the future.
Just the increase of the material. Material's on
Correct.
order, but it could be higher depending on when it's delivered.
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
That
we
works.
filled Indiana and Wadsworth shops with the materials that we need for right now.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sorry, while we're paused, can I ask a question? And I know it's a small amount, but the EV software station, seems to me that there's state funding available for something like that. Are we looking into that and how we might pay for it that way?
Yeah, actually, and that is coming up in some of our utilities leave behind slides, but we're continuing to look at options here for electrifying both our fleet and options for our shops. So I don't know, Sharon, if you want to speak to more grant funding opportunities, but there's both items in the funded and unfunded areas of our program related to electrification.
Great.
Finally, beyond our current unfunded requests, our team is continuing to forecast into the future. So we have additional positions that we anticipate in 2024 and beyond that we also want to present tonight. You'll see additional enterprise-funded projects as we look to build up our stormwater program following on some of the master planning elements that you've seen in sewer and water, as well as we continue to build the pavement program, some additional support needs there. So this is a little bit further out in the future, but things that we're looking to bring back. So some things to leave behind for Public Works. We continue to focus on delivery of our top priorities from the strategic plan, and that's fully staffing and delivering our bond projects. Mr. Archer's here now and can probably speak to some of our plans there, but the team has been working closely with finance to forecast those projects, as well as the cash flow analysis for when we might need additional funds. And so we're working very closely with the team to be prepared to fund those projects. I mentioned a lot about the pavement quality index and how the team's going to be coming back to present some scenarios and seek guidance from council on achieving those goals in the broader 10-year pavement maintenance plan. So we're going to continue to focus on that plan and coming forward with requesting some priority funding needs for that plan. ADA transition, you've heard a lot about. There's other projects in here too that we want to continue to focus on in the next 5-year time frame. So that's continuing to address missing sidewalks and mobility strategies, delivery of our Myers Pool project. And then in the long term, looking to really reevaluate the CIP and address some of those other unfunded, unprioritized needs that Mr. Devin mentioned earlier related to the additional capital needs that aren't currently reflected in the model.
On your last bullet there, in the 5 years out, the Initiate Citizen CIP Committee, we still had a pretty healthy list from the last committee. Do we know what we got to scratch off, if any? I mean, obviously, we have 2 major projects.
Yes, we've been actually making steady progress related to that, and that's why we proposed in the next 5 years, perhaps bringing back another committee to help us fill the slate.
So you think we'll get through that list?
I think we've been making good progress, yeah.
Maybe we can get an update on that list of where you are or when you anticipate, because I think some of the new council members may not know about that list.
Councilmember Barber, that's one of our performance measures, and we'll share it with you.
Is that list and
Yes.
when it will be done?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Good one. And on utilities, we've been up here speaking about the proposed increases to rates, bi-monthly service fees, and system development charges, or also known as TAP fees. Much of this is just continuing to support the plan development and growth pace for itself. And those fees cover forecasted overhead and pass-through charges that we're obligated to pay to Denver Water and Metro. I wanted to also focus on the fleet electrification initiative, so that's something we continue to make progress on, assessing electric vehicles with every purchase and coordinating with Xcel Energy on opportunities for funding and charging infrastructure. Other things that are on the radar, we continue to optimize delivery of the waste hauling program and are carefully tracking our staff time related to delivery of that program and how to be most efficient there. So ultimately, I think this wraps up the infrastructure portion of the talks. Are there any questions that we can help answer?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the fleet electrification transition. So when do we anticipate at this point will be fully electric?
Sharon, can I phone a friend on that one? Thanks.
Thank you. We're working on that. So we've got in the strategic plan a couple of milestones to get us there. I think it's a little early to forecast exactly a date out, but we are going to be working on that over the next year. Partly it is infrastructure for charging, right? Mm-hmm. So we've talked about that. We're looking at funding availability, partnering with Xcel Energy, seeing what the region is doing. Our fleet manager, Ike Miller, is part of a regional team that is problem solving those types of things. But with every vehicle purchase right now, we are weighing the options that are around electric vehicles and seeing what we can do to purchase now. And we'll be coming back to you regularly over the next year or two, I would imagine, with the strategic result updates.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to represent the Organizational and Service Effectiveness Work System. That is 5 departments, so a little bit different approach with you all on our work system. I will go over some of the overview of the entire work system, and then we're going to have the department heads from each area speak to what's on their radar and other items as well. So as a reminder, sorry, a little distraction. As a reminder, the departments in OSE include legal, HR, finance, IT, and the city manager's office. Okay? All right, this is the OSE summary of revenues. As you can see, a couple of highlights just to point out for you. On the tax revenues, we reflect a 3.5% increase in 2023 due to increases in sales tax that we're seeing that then will level out in 2024 with just a 2% increase. And then under intergovernmental revenues, there's a decline in 2023 because the 2022 revised line reflects $5.5 million in ARPA funding, just for your awareness there. And then moving on to expenditures, a couple of things to highlight there. If you see in service and charges in 2022, that includes ARPA funds spent. And then in supplies and expenses in 2023, there's an increase there due to increased maintenance and replacement spending in our computer replacement fund. And finally, under transfers, we include some transfers to the Streets Maintenance Fund, the CIP Fund, and Parks Fund, among others. So our mid-cycle additions that we are proposing for you and have been approved include what you see up here. The first one is that Senior Sustainability Coordinator. This is in alignment with your City Council strategic plan and the directive that you gave us for 2022 to help fund further a sustainability program and the hiring of a sustainability coordinator. It's in the OSE work system for these purposes because we started with the requests in the city manager's office, but that is going to be moving to vibrant communities and neighborhoods. You have a couple of entries for human resources. You see that we are reclassifying the deputy director position, and the funding from that position will go to help fund the 2 new positions that you see for executive assistant and HR coordinator. That is in direct response to immediate and ongoing needs around recruitment, as well as new employment laws pertaining to healthcare, pay equity, and those things. Finally, with finance, we have added a payroll specialist due to increasing complexity with payroll functions as a result of some of these new employment laws, as well as the need to start preparing for our enterprise resource planning replacement and the support that will be needed from finance on that end. And then, as you know, we also approved the addition of a safety specialist, which is housed in our legal department as a result of the safety work that we did after the accident that we had in 2021. Moving on to our proposed items for 2023 and 2024, we're recommending smaller items, as you can see, additional funding for the sustainability program, again, moving from CMO to VCN. And then continuing, highlighting the larger one that you see for our Chief Information Security Officer. That is, again, in alignment with our strategic plan and with the need to really focus leadership and dedicated attention to cybersecurity across all of our IT platforms for the organization. And so that's one of our recommendations as well to highlight. So our list of unfunded include what you see here. And I just want to highlight a couple of those items for you as well. As you can see, the sustainability planning consultant, we are emphasizing the need for the position and some small funding to start the program with the need that getting the position on board and working with our ASAC resident group will help then determine maybe future need for a consultant down the road. As you can see with these other unfunded items, obviously they're all important, and as in following with the theme that we've been talking about all night with you, because they're unfunded doesn't necessarily mean they're unimportant. All of these need to be addressed at some point, but the priority is, as it is, these are the decisions that we've made for now. Okay. Any questions on the unfunded items that you see?
Don't see any.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, I expect you to speak up if you've got anything.
Yes, I will. I've had a couple of questions, but I figured I can just follow up. They're nothing earth-shattering.
Very good.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Morris now, and she'll speak to you about the 5- and 10-year out plan for legal.
Good evening, Council. I think this is the first time I have spoken to you from this podium as opposed to my seat, so this is an interesting experience. In any event, I'm here to talk to you tonight to give you a little bit of a heads up in terms of our budget for 3 items or 3 topics that I think are going to be impactful over the next 5 to 10 years. So those 3 items, I'm going to start out with the need for increased staff. We currently have in the legal department a time-limited legal assistant position. We have done some analysis of our existing work. We originally received authority for that position as a 3-year position related to additional work coming out of the bond projects. Given the work that we're forecasting out over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll likely be asking to make that particular position permanent beginning in January of 2024. The next thing, we're probably going to be requesting another attorney and paralegal to cover additional litigation, records, and legislative drafting work. We've been talking about this for a few years. We've had an increase in the amount of litigation over time as our population increases and various other factors, and we'll talk a little bit about some new state legislation as we get down to our next one. But we anticipate now that the amount of work has increased enough, and that increase has been sustained for long enough that we feel that it will be warranted this next year to request an additional couple of positions. We also want to be monitoring the number of claims and the amount of time that it's taking us to administer claims as we come in terms of our risk team. If we have a need over the next 5 to 10 years for increased support or staffing as our litigation rises. We also are looking at, in terms of our second topic, an increase in litigation and claims costs. So first we'll talk about number of claims. Due to some new state legislation, we are seeing an increase in police claims. And that means increased litigation and claims administration costs. We're required in many instances to farm out work to outside counsel to prevent conflicts of interest. We're seeing increased costs across the board related to that. In addition to an increase in the number of claims, we're also seeing a rise in the cost of claims settlements. a rise in the cost of insurance, and also a rise in the cost of things like restorative care. So we'll need to be monitoring that over the next 5 to 10 years to make sure that we're requesting increases in the risk and safety management budget to match those rising costs as well. The last thing that I wanted to raise for your attention is our safety program. Over the past year, we have placed an increased amount of attention and resources around making a more robust safety culture. As we continue to build out that program, we're going to be looking at our existing resources, we're going to be looking at our funding, our technical tools, and our staffing to ensure that that program is meeting goals. So it's possible down the road that you will see additional requests related to properly building out that safety program. Any questions for me?
Don't see any.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Council. Gabriella with Human Resources Department. I am here to talk with you a little bit about our upcoming, what's on our radar and challenges for the next 5 to 10 years. A theme throughout here is that these are all organization-wide impacts with specific challenges to the Human Resources Department who deliver on these programs. What's on our radar right now is this continued extraordinary employment market. You heard Mark Devon say earlier that our turnover is at 17.7%. That was our turnover ending in 2021, and we're currently averaging about 12.3%. We are on pace to meet that 17% number by the end of the year if things don't change, and I don't see them changing, honestly, for quite some time. It's unpredictable what's going to happen with our market conditions. Attracting employees is extremely challenging. There are more jobs than there are workers. And then retaining our high-performing workforce is also equally challenging. With our high turnover, we've been hearing from our employees they're leaving for things we really can't change quickly. For example, cost of living in Colorado, they're leaving the state. And they're also leaving public service as a career, especially our police officers, which you heard Mark mention some of the challenges they're facing. In addition to that, if that's not enough, we have our big employee resource planning project implementation, which will completely revolutionize all of the systems and programs that HR manages. And our total rewards philosophy update, which I will be presenting you with updates on that later this year. And then paid family medical leave options to respond to the Colorado Family Act. 5 years out, I suspect our biggest challenges is going to be a revisit of collective bargaining, a mandate on public employers that was passed for counties for 2023, and we do expect that they'll take another stab at cities in the future. And then we are also already being asked about the ability to support remote work from anywhere, and that means anywhere. So other states, we currently do not support that. We believe we should employ employees in Colorado, but this is a need that will continue to increase, and supporting remote work from anywhere requires a different staffing model to be able to support multi-state legislations and laws related to pay and benefits and all kinds of employment conditions. 10 years out, believe it or not, we'll be facing another retirement wave. Your Generation X will start to retire, and with that comes a whole more new generational expectations, challenges around succession planning and knowledge transfer will continue to challenge us in the next decade. Any questions for me?
The question I've got is, are we doing any kind of analysis of the efficiency of remote work? In terms, I mean, you know, when we had to switch to this model, and I think it's here to stay, how do we, you know, make sure that people are truly being efficient and getting the job done? As a retired person, I see a lot of people spending a lot of time walking their dogs and on the golf course, and, you know, they're working remotely,
Yes.
walking their dogs and on the golf course.
True. Our efficiency measures are really through our performance targets and measures. If those continue to improve or we keep meeting our targets, it shows that we're performing as efficiently or better. than we have in the past. But it's also true that remote work comes with different working conditions. You may not work a typical 8 to 5 schedule. You might be seeing people walking their dogs, but they're working at night. So it requires a little bit of a different approach to how we visualize work.
I'm just too old school. Fair enough. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm Generation X, and I was thinking about coming back here to work for Anessa to mow lawns when I retire. That's what I want to do. I want to put lines in the park. Yeah, that's what
You're
I'm
hired.
You may want to rethink that.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Passing it on to Brian Archer.
Mayor and council, I apologize for being late. So we'll take a look at what finance is looking at the next 5 to 10 years. One of the items that I think has been mentioned, but we're working on, is replacing our ERP solution. And so that is a very big topic for our team. As part of that, we're looking at different ways to service our customers, whether or not we would centralize AP and purchasing, and how we will process the budget in the future. 10 years out, I think Ryan's team spoke to this a little bit, but we're looking at build out. And so what will the future be from our building use tax revenue? And then ultimately, finance is going through a transition. So we've had many team members that were 15 to 25-year employees who are now retiring. And what we're seeing is a shorter workforce. People that work maybe 5 years or 7 years. And how we can set up our systems to make sure that when they move on to their next job, that we can replace them quickly. So that is what finance is facing. Any questions?
Could you share what ERP is and how is it used?
Absolutely. So that's our enterprise resource plan.
And why do we need it, and what do you use it for?
So that is a solution that is our finance, HR, IT solution that does, in this case, AR, AP, GL, processes our payroll.
What are all those acronyms?
That is more letters than the alphabet, Brian.
It's our accounting solution. How about that?
You track all your expenses,
Yeah,
your
our expenses,
revenues,
our budget, our
cost center
revenues,
transfers.
our personnel, our HR, everything is in there. So right now we use Oracle Financials, and we will look to replace that in the next 2 years.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to make
I
sure everyone
apologize.
understood what
Thank
you
you.
were talking about. 'Cause it is a big lift. It's not a small.
Yeah, we're expecting this to be a 2 to 3 year solution, and it will take all of us and more to get that in.
I mean, it's literally gutting the engine out and putting a new one in.
The current
And we-
solution was implemented in 1998 and 1999, and so we're, what, 22 years, almost 23
Yeah.
years old?
Far exceeded software lifehood.
Yes. I will turn it over to Craig.
Thanks. Thank you. Hello, council. I would say IT is very fluid right now. We have some great big things going with ERP, which is foundational, touches so many, every employee, basically. We've got cybersecurity that is a threat landscape changing all the time, all around us. We've got some really big things going with data and analytics. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. Talking about what are we looking at, what are we expecting? The technology replacement fund, the internal service fund for that, is struggling to keep up. We have more employees, we have higher technology costs, we have inflation, all those types of things. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on as part of our financial resiliency. 5 years out, excuse me, HB 21-1110, which is the digital accessibility law, is going to be impactful for us. And in some of those ways, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to be. I actually just received some documentation while I was out of office last week that hopefully will reduce the scope of what that impact actually is. But essentially everything that is digital, whether it is an archive in MuniDocs, whether it is a track-it system that customers use for permits, whether it's an Oracle that employees use, has to be accessible. And that's using what's called WCAG, which is Web Compatibility and Accessibility Guide standards, which are very specific. And the cost to go back and retrofit that to 1 million or so documents that exist in our city records dating back to the early 1900s is not going to be something that's an easy pill to swallow. So we're trying to figure out what that's going to mean for us and how we're going to respond. That law takes effect July 1st, 2024. We're also evaluating a potential move from Google to Microsoft 365, which would allow some platform consolidations for other products. Things like reducing Zoom licensing, reducing some of our phone licensing, going to more soft phones, even perhaps looking at some of our security or cybersecurity capabilities. 10 years out, quantum computing. This is a big question mark, and you just need to hear it right now. I don't know what the answers are, and I don't know what we need to do about it. But at the very bottom, quantum computing, it's a generation of computing. It's a paradigm shift that is 158 million times faster than anything that we have today. In 4 minutes, quantum computers can achieve the amount of work that takes the fastest supercomputer on the planet today 10,000 years to do, which means every encryption standard that exists is broken in minutes. So NIST and all of these different organizations are trying to figure out what that means. It's not going to be a kind of computer that everybody has in their basement, but nation-state actors are going to have them. Iran's, China's, Russia's, and they have been theoretical, but they exist now. Google has one. So it's going to change how we're going to have to adapt and respond from a technology perspective, but it's impossible for me to stand here and forecast exactly what that means right now.
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. You actually touched on my question when you mentioned nation-state actors and probably corporate actors, which were really more like corporate state actors at this point, giving their broad reach across nations. So who's leading on this technology? Is it the U.S.? Is it China? Is it private companies that span boundaries?
It is mostly, so it is kind of moving from academia right now, where it was more of a research model, into, I would call, U.S. private corporations. Google's and some of those types of large pocket players in technology space are sort of who's at the forefront of that right now. But as it starts to get out, I mean, Google's had one allegedly since 2015.
Wow. And how far behind do we think others will be as it gets out?
10 years.
10 years, okay. All right, and is it possible, very, very likely, the answer is yes, that this is going to be able to attack grid systems?
I think this is going to be one of those game changers that is just going to require technologists to rethink how we create boundaries, how we create what's called the edge, and how we defend core systems. It's a little early for that right now. NIST, I can tell you that NIST put out a proposed encryption standard for quantum. Right now they're scheduled to have an encryption standard for quantum published by 2024. They put out the first draft. It was broken in about an hour.
Okay. And does that have the ability to break blockchain as well?
That one I can't speak to that. Blockchain is more of a distributed and recorded, so it's less of a try to break an encryption. It's more that portions of transactions are stored across the globe, across all of the different compute centers. So you would need to access all the pieces of the transaction, which is a little more difficult to do.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Craig.
And SIM replacement, that's one of our cybersecurity defense tools. And really what I'm trying to push with all of these types of products right now is that we need automated response in anything that we're considering bringing on board, because if what we have right now is a human that has to take a manual response, and that just doesn't scale. So we're looking for automation in these different areas. Any other questions?
No, thanks. You scare us to death.
My pleasure. I think.
Oh yeah, and you can tell me I got hacked on my Facebook account again. How do I stop that?
You need more complex passwords. I think Lori is up next. Oh, it's Linda. I'm sorry.
Is your password 12345?
No, it's PASSWRD, isn't that a good one?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to finish out our work system with the city manager's discussion on 5- and 10-year organizational leadership radar items. I am not going to go through that exhaustive list. However, I do want to highlight that it represents all of our work systems. The city manager's office is there to help lead and support the incredible leaders that we have in this room with all of the challenges and projects that you see in front of you. Clearly, this list is long and it's complex. It is a lot of heavy lifts that will require strong leadership and collaboration, not only with our organization, but with our community. And with that, we are done with this section. Any other questions for OSE? Okay. Moving on to Safe Community, and I think Bridget is up.
So for those of you who don't know, this is Bridget Roberts. She is the PD business analyst, and then we have Judge Kurtz here. Bridget is going to go ahead and do the presentation, and we will be available for any questions you might have.
Hello, everyone. All right, we will jump in. So nothing really of note between our revenues in any of our funds. Everything balances, and our TI funds are balanced through the 10-year models as well. Any questions on that slide? No. Same with our expenses. And for our mid-cycle approvals that we had one behavioral health clinician that was approved, and then a second behavioral health clinician. The difference between those two is that one of them would have been a licensed clinician, and these are both funded through our co-responder grant that is actually through the Behavioral Health Administration, formerly Office of Behavioral Health. So these are our two co-responders. We currently have both of those positions filled. One of them is working on her licensure, so we have two number one clinicians. And then we have two police records specialists. Those are temporary positions. Same with the two police service technicians. Those are also temporary. Those positions are built into the 2023 budget. And then Judge Kurtz, you can speak to your senior probation officer, but I know that one is built through the 2024 budget.
And to go back to Mr. Pfeiffer's point earlier, the record specialists and technicians, that's the cost for two, not
Correct.
for
Yes.
1 times 2. Very good.
And as of Friday, the police records specialists and the police service technicians, all 4 of those positions have been hired and filled. Good. Proposed for our budget, there were 2 sergeants we asked for. Again, that's the cost for 2 of those positions, benefits and retirement in there. Any questions on that one?
Sorry, I have a question back on the previous slide about the behavioral health clinicians. How many would we like to have that feel like would really meet our needs?
So ideally, this grant would fund 3 positions. We're kind of in flux right now with our contract with Jefferson Center for Mental Health since that got canceled. Our original grant was for 3 positions. We brought 2 of those in-house just because it was easier for us to attract the talent based on the salary we were able to offer. So right now, we have 2 in-house. That 3rd position was supposed to be through Jefferson Center, but we don't have it because we're not in contract with them anymore. So ideally 3.
Okay, thank you.
And then on the evidence storage building, do we have a site picked? Are we?
So we've narrowed it down. We believe we have a site that we're very interested in out by the current impound lot, just west of the bus barn.
Got it. Thanks.
And our unfunded requests, you guys can read through those. The only thing I wanted to mention on here is that the forensic scientist, that position was an ask that we had for our Jefferson County Regional Crime Lab, and that position would have been specific to firearms examinations.
So a quick question, why the 2 officers not funded? I mean.
So we were asked to rank our positions based on need, and we started with supervisors first because we had more of a need for supervisory positions in the field. Can you speak to anything else on that?
So the budget process, as you understand, is a big, complicated machine, and we understand that there's a lot of other competing resources or competing requests for those resources. We do believe that we were heard through this budget process. We did have a lot of asks. We're trying to prepare ourselves for the increased crime, the increased gun crime that we're certainly seeing. We want to make sure that we're able to respond appropriately. We also see the increase, that the resource drain that we have as it relates to addressing the homeless community. So we would like those officers, but we understand the process is much bigger than just a PD.
Yeah, I'm going to use this opportunity to make a statement. I talked to Lori about it already. I know that we are prideful of our per capita, police officer per capita with our community, but the increase of the community has increased probably more than your sworn officers have since I've been here. So our community has grown roughly, 20% in the last 12, but I don't think your sworn officers have grown 20%.
And so there's a couple of things that we look at. We don't want to just look at the per capita, although that is a valid reason. When we make position requests, we're actually looking at resource requirements. So we're looking at our call load, we're looking at the crime rate, we're looking at, you know, our dispatch calls for service, that type of thing, and that's the reason that we're asking for those. Certainly, we are we have the least number of officers per capita in the metro area, certainly for an agency our size in a metro area. But we do believe that we gain efficiencies out of our staff that other agencies don't, what we require out of our officers, the fact that they do case filings and all of that. But if you're asking me whether or not we have the per capita number of officers we would like, no. The honest answer is no.
And I appreciate what you're saying, and I totally continue to think we should, but you're also, the way I would read that is, we're reacting to crime in our city, and I wish we would get to a point, and current staffing issues aside, I would like to get our community back to where we were, where you have proactive policing, community policing, and really get ahead versus behind. Because I think, one, it stresses the workload of our officers today. You know, they're working long days, long hours, overtime, with it currently not having that fulfilled. It would be nice if we can go that plus another 10. I'm not saying 20% is the number, but whatever that number is, it should follow the flow of everything you said, plus our idea of what a safe community is, and get back into proactive law enforcement, community policing, and traffic enforcement.
Councilmember Pfeiffer, I couldn't agree with you more. We certainly want to make sure that we're proactive. We have a couple of individuals in here that are part of our core team, and we have tried to be proactive, and I can tell you we're losing battle there. However, I would like to speak to the positions. We're not done asking for these positions yet, and Bridget was probably getting ready to say this. We do have our 21 and 22 accounts, so we will make a request mid-cycle for additional police positions. We're also continually looking for grant funding. Now, that grant funding still has to be approved by City Council, because that's a part-time thing. They'll pay for officers for either a certain percentage or for a certain number a year, with the expectation then that the city picks up the cost continuing and moving out. But we will be working with Brian Archer and certainly the city manager to see whether or not we can add positions to our 21 and 22 funds later in the year.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to call it out for a moment, because I think it's an opportunity that we need to start having the conversation now, because it does take us years to get to that place. And as that, conversation takes place, I think the crime could take a grab of our community when we're so proud of our safe community, and obviously our department has had, and our city has had two, extraordinary incidents where our officers were murdered. And it's not that the crime did it, but it does show there's an elevated boldness with our crime element within our community. Because I'll sit on my soapbox for a minute. I think it's because we don't prosecute our current laws, and we don't put them in jail, and that's beyond our borders in this conversation. But we also can't just exhaust our police officers who could be overworked because of a failure in the judicial system down the stream. And I know the judge is nodding her head, and she can do what she can, but you're only good within our city. We still have county that has to take a lot of those crimes on, and those criminal elements have to go into that jail. So I just think we need to start having a conversation around What does our police department look like in the next 5 to 10 years? And is this the right size? And are we giving the quality of life that we expect as citizens? So whatever we can do to improve that.
I think something else that was interesting that our city attorney pointed out is that we're seeing the community is much more litigious against law enforcement. I would like you to know that our use of force is not statistically going up. So our officers are not using more force against the community, though I would tell you the community is certainly using more force against our police officers.
And I think that speaks to our requirement of a 4-year degree plays into that certainly. And I think we've got an exemplary police department. And yeah, we want to, obviously, as additional funds free up, and we look at what are the unfunded needs that we have, community policing is going to be a top one. So
I'll take all I can get.
We know you will. But, I think some of us, and to go with what Mr. Pfeiffer's saying, some of us believe in the broken window syndrome, and you can't let the little stuff slide because it then just becomes more accepted, more commonplace, and that's not where we want Arvada to be.
Yeah, it infests our community, and then it's hard to get rid of it. And so, I don't want it to grab on and take it over, and then it's nothing that the police department did. It could be us up here holding you back or holding back our, ability to grow these the number of officers. Of course, we have to still backfill what we have. I mean, everything I'm saying is assuming we're at 100% today, what it would look like tomorrow.
So to speak to that, we were very aggressive in that. We have 9 people in our field training program. We have 10 in our academy, and we have held 15 slots for the next academy. That doesn't count the laterals that we intend to hire, so we're going to aggressively recruit and hire.
That is great news, Chief. Good job. And good job to HR. I'm sure they're helping you.
Okay, so also on these 2 records and PST positions, that ask is to make them permanent. Again, we will ask for those positions in the following budget cycle as well. These were just our unfunded line item requests that we made. Any questions?
Thanks for not getting snowing a helicopter.
It was on the list. Cut it out.
Thanks for maintaining your credibility.
Gotta try. So 5 years out for the PD, we need to focus on a training facility that's appropriate for an agency our size and the training requirements. Those training requirements are both put on our officers by you guys, our city council, and through the state. 10 years out, we need to continue to follow our growth study that we did and ensure that our position asks align up with our population growth, as Councilmember Pfeiffer mentioned. The national narrative on policing continues to make this a difficult job. The rising crime, and especially the violent crime that's increases the workload throughout the entire department. It also impacts the tenure of our officers and our supervisors. We continue to see staffing challenges, as everybody has spoken to. We're having hiring issues, retention, promotion issues, and again, with the increase of violent crime, it has impacted who wants to do this job, and that last bullet point also kind of goes to the one I just spoke of. So law enforcement and the legislation kind of hindering this job impacts who wants to do this job, as well as the unfunded mandates, body-worn cameras naming one.
Yeah, we've been having some discussions among council that we've got to get much more aggressive with our legislature in terms of pushing back against some of the things that they have done here recently.
And just to speak to the court's 5 and 10-year plan, some of the things that we're looking at in the future, the second senior probation officer position that was funded mid-cycle was approved through ARPA funding, and we're going to be eventually asking to make that a permanent position. That position primarily works in our One Small Step program as a case manager for our unhoused community members who come into our court. As you all are very likely aware, our unhoused population is growing drastically and is committing a lot of crime in our city. And so our case manager, that was a very well-timed position add, because we could use 2 of him at this point, just with the amount of cases that we're seeing in our One Small Step program. It's an incredible amount of work for him. In addition to what we're seeing, we're still working through that fully paperless case management system. We're working on creative ways to finance the remainder of the technology that we need to accomplish this. Our hope is to accomplish it by the end of the year, but we're needing to be a little bit creative in how we fund the technology that we need. We are looking at fully utilizing our probation department. As you know, one of our probation officers is working primarily with the One Small Step defendants. The other one is primarily supervising our juvenile defendants. I think we've talked previously in addition to the rate of increasing crime among our unhoused population, we're also seeing a massive increase in violence in our schools. And so I would say about 70% of the cases that we see in our juvenile docket are due to some sort of violent act committed in our schools. So our probation officers are very busy these days. And finally, we have seen a lot of unfunded legislative mandates, really focusing on municipal courts and courts in general. One of those was the 48-hour bond bill that we received. We decided not to fund it and not to do it, but my concern, and I think what we need to be mindful of moving forward, is that at this point, because the jail will not accept people on our warrants, that really only impacts about 20 to 25 defendants per year. When and if the jail starts to accept our defendants on warrants, that number will greatly rise, and so the number of defendants impacted by us not doing weekend advisements will rise as well, and that ultimately could become a safety concern. Some of our defendants have anywhere between 10 and 25 pending cases. Those people are getting high enough cash surety bonds that they are being arrested because it's appropriate, and they are community safety issues. So although we're deciding not to do weekend court now, it may be something that we need to consider doing in the future. Any questions?
So,
Go ahead.
just like I said with the police department, I think we need to have the framework and the constructs behind to support the whole process. Some of this is outside of our scope, but if you're not there for what's within our control, which is, municipal court and our system, and if that's not there and they're out there trying to bust their butt enforcing what we needed done, I think it goes hand in hand. So if we need additional probation officers and the structure to support our police department and due process for our citizens and visitors, we need to stay focused. I don't want, in this arena, I don't ever want us as Arvada as the reason why our community can't be safe. I guess that's the only way I can say it. If it's the county or it's the state causing it, then we up here as elected officials will do everything we can to argue and debate and fight for our communities to be safe, and that's with our county elected officials or our state legislator. So I just want to underscore that it's equally important that you have the structure in place and the resources to support the process. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Janes.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. It's nice to see you tonight. I will be presenting the budget for the VCN, Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods Work System. The lines of business for our work system include parks, so parks maintenance and athletic field programming, Majestic View Nature Center, urban design, golf and restaurants, and festivals, arts, and culture. And so the services provided by the VCN work system really are a key driver of quality of life in our community. Residents frequently cite VCN services as reasons why Arvada is unique and why our community is a vibrant and desirable place to live. So this first slide is a summary of the revenues that support the work of the VCN work system. I want to bring your attention to the intergovernmental line here. You'll see a $7.9 million decrease in revenue after 2021. So there are two things at play here that I want to point out. So one is the change to the historical IGA that the city has had with Apex Park and Recreation District. So previously, the city was being reimbursed for 85% of the total cost of athletic field maintenance as part of our agreement with Apex. So starting in 2022, you'll see in the budget with the change of the IGA, this intergovernmental reimbursement of $1.3 million a year has been removed from the revenue model. So the second thing at play here is that this summer, the Housing Division, previously located in the VCN work system, was moved to CED. And so within the intergovernmental line, revenues from the Housing Choice Voucher Program and CDBG were reflected here in this line item. So that's about a $6.5 million move of revenues from VCN to CED. So here are our expenditures for our work system. So VCN is the work system here tonight with a 10-year model that does not currently balance. This really was expected after we went through the renegotiation of the IGA with Apex, and it will take us some time to correct the model, but our team is already working hard to focus on both our revenues and our expenditures as key strategies to correct the imbalance. So these efforts are part of the city's larger financial resilience work that Lori Gillis will be speaking to at the end of this presentation. So the VCN team is using data to evaluate our performance against leading parks industry standards. So for example, we're assessing our operating expenditures per acre of parkland. We're evaluating the distribution of our operating expenses, and we're using a cost recovery model by evaluating our revenues as a percentage of our total operating costs. So these are the mid-cycle additions for the Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods work system. So these additions were really proposed to fill key operational gaps for our work. The addition of the 4 Parks Maintenance Worker 2 positions are directly related to workplace safety. So not only do these positions support the maintenance of our parks and open space and trail system, they're also key recommendations in the incident report following the accident that we had with one of our parks workers in 2021. The addition of the other 5 positions you see here for parks are supporting the transition of field scheduling from Apex to the city of Arvada. So these are the proposed Vibrant Community and Neighborhood additions for the 2023 and 2024 budget. You'll see a line for festivals. This $50,000 really brings the festivals budget into alignment with what it really costs to put on a full year of festivals and events, including the increasing costs of delivering these services and events. The supplies line is for the Majestic View Nature Center's new camp programs. So this cost here for supplies for camps is 100% offset by the camp revenues that we have collected in our first year. And then lastly, you've heard a theme about the credit card fees due to increasing costs. So that's true for our work system as well. So here is a list of the unfunded VCN requests. I really want to talk about the second line item here, the Lake Arbor Golf Course improvements. So we're currently working on near-term solutions that are designed to keep play in the target landing areas of Lake Arbor Golf Course. So we have funding available for the phase 1 of this work, and the team is currently implementing and planning for this work. This $450,000 increase would fund phase 2. Which includes more extensive beautification, actions and resource efficiency improvements. And phase 2 would also include play improvements related to renovation of tees and of the bunkers there. You'll see the $1 million for athletic field maintenance. Again, this number reflects the change in the historical IGA between the city of Arvada and Apex for athletic field maintenance. We've really chipped away at this number already. You'll notice that the $900,000 increase to the general fund transfer that was discussed earlier in the presentation, it does include a $500,000 increase specifically for athletic field maintenance. And then the other $400,000 of that $900 is for the reclassification of part-time positions into full-time positions for parks, as well as the new maintenance costs associated with our maintenance of the Ralston Central Splash Pad.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the phase 1 of the Lake Arbor Golf Course improvements. So I'm assuming that the safety issues that we have talked about and are really trying to be addressed in phase 1. Is that
exactly?
Correct?
Yeah, we have dollars now to address the out-of-bound play and really focusing on keeping the players' balls in the area of the course where they're designed to play.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Are we the guinea pigs for the city golf tournament that's coming up to see if we can keep the ball in play?
I wish I could have worked out the timing to make that possible. That would be great. All right, so what else do we need to know for VCN? So 5 years from now, we will have implemented our long-term financial resilience strategies for VCN Funds 14, which is parks, and Fund 43, which is golf. We will have completed an update or be in the process of updating 2 of our key master plans, so the Parks, Open Space and Trails Master Plan, as well as the Lake Arbor Golf Course Master Plan. We will have refined our athletic field programming and maintenance programs to provide an inclusive and high quality and cost-effective service to our community. We will be continuing to advance sustainability as directed through the City Council Strategic Plan. And we're also working on data collection so that 5 years from now, we have a really clear understanding of the voice of the customer when it comes to questions about parks' level of service, festivals and events, arts and culture, et cetera. So 5 to 10 years out from now, you've heard a theme tonight about the build-out conditions, so this is important to VCN as well. We expect reduced building activity, which will eventually reduce our available park development fees, which we use for our TLC program. So renovating playgrounds every year, taking on park renovations and new park facilities and trail facilities. We also have the JCMD, the end of the JCMD financing period on our radar as well. We will be taking on 7 new parks and a system of trails and trail easements and maintaining those assets at the end of this financing period, and we'll need to resource appropriately for that. And then implementation of the ADA transition plan is a big one, a big rock that we're moving uphill that we'll continue to be focusing on over the next 10 years. And lastly, on the radar for us, the impacts of climate variability on our park facilities, our green infrastructure, and our tree canopy are really going to be more pronounced as time goes on. And so our team is already thinking ahead for how we can adapt and adjust our practices and our resourcing of our teams and of our work so that we are resilient to the future changes that we are already seeing today. And then lastly, like many of my colleagues, we are experiencing staffing challenges in our team. It has become incredibly challenging to hire seasonal staff to run our mowers. Many of our supervisors are, riding mowers during the summer rather than supervising all the time. And we're also having trouble with retention as well. So we're looking at new ways and changing our assumptions about our workforce planning and kind of what a fully staffed parks team looks like. And so again, this will be part of our financial resiliency planning as we're looking to rebalance the model in years to come. I'm going to pass it over to Lori Gillis.
Before you do that, is there any discussion in terms of the restaurant operations of concessionaire versus the way we've traditionally done it?
Yeah, so I know that was outlined in last year's budget letter, and that is another item on our radar as well. Okay. That's a big one, Mayor, so thank you for pointing that out. Yes. Good. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm going to start out with a thank you to the team. Great job. And you can see the team coming together and the information presented tonight. This budget was pulled together under the leadership of City Manager Mark Devon, all 340 pages. So we kept it short tonight, but there's plenty of information there and a lot of thought. I also want to thank Brian Archer and his team for keeping us all together and pulling the information together. This is a lot of work, and it's good work, and it's really collaborative thinking. We're at that point of resourcing your vision, your City Council strategic plan. And through all the master planning and review of our service levels, we've identified a lot of unmet needs and expectations, and we have work to do. You've seen that in the unfunded list. One of your strategic results is about resiliency, and you heard every presenter tonight hint to what we're doing there. And financial resiliency is the work we have ahead to ensure that we're able to provide the services and serve the community in the way that we have historically, or make changes to our service levels in order to ensure we're able to fund what we have agreed to and what we're able to provide in services. Throughout the process, you did have many requests. They weren't bells and whistles, but they weren't funded. The unfunded list will serve as a reminder of trade-offs as we go through the year. We've brought that discipline to this team, so when new items come up, we want to look back to that list and say, do these requests rise above things that were not funded? I had a good conversation with Councilmember Marriott about that, as far as what are the trade-offs when we make decisions to add things to the budget, and what does that look like? So you'll see that discipline as we move forward with a consolidated list of unfunded requests going into this proposed budget. Historically, we've had more flexibility with one-time dollars. We've been able to fund things as they've come up. We've funded many things going into the next year with one-time money. There will be one-time money this year. Going into 2023, I can't tell you what those numbers are now because we're headed into those last few months of the year. But it won't be as it has been in the past. We won't have those one-time building revenues that we've had, and I know that Mr. Archer has presented that information and prepared us for that, but that's a change from where we've been. So financial resiliency, as we look at that, is going to be really important. You heard that our internal service funds are still not fully funded. We are way ahead of where we were, but we have things that we need to look at, even looking at items in the strategic plan, things we need to look at related to fully funding all the internal service funds to support the other funds. When we look at what's going on with technology, you heard from Mr. Poley tonight about needs. Cybersecurity is of critical importance, and modernizing our existing systems, consolidating systems, is also a priority. We're also facing several unfunded mandates that we're just getting our arms around what those will mean, whether it's body-worn cameras or other legislation. So we have a lot of things on our radar that we need to pay attention to. With that being said, this team over here has been very thoughtful in what they presented and what they're looking at as far as what's coming forward into 2023, 2024, and where we're going to be with service levels. So you're going to hear of work that we're doing related to needs, service levels into the future, and then at the tail end of that, as part of that strategic result, we'll be looking at what other financial resources are available. And with that, I'll conclude, and ask if you have other questions.
Mr. Jones, do you have anything?
I don't have any questions. I just was going to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank the entire team. That's a lot. That is a lot of information, but it feels like it was put together in a very systematic way, and quite honestly, easy to understand. The thing that really concerns me as I look, forward to the next several years are those things, those compromises that that either A, council asks the team to make or to consider, or B, those things that are caused from the legislature that cause us to spend money on things that we wouldn't otherwise spend money on. And so I would just, again, applaud the team for listening, but again, encourage the team to push back when you think council's asking for something that you think money should be spent in other places. So those are my thoughts as we were going through it. But again, I really appreciate the work and the way that you presented it tonight. That seemed very fluid. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mormon?
Thank you, and I just want to echo my appreciation to the team. This is my first time through the budget process. I'm very impressed with all your work that you have done, and again, it's been very thoughtful and strategic. I have, I guess, two kind of specific questions. One is, I know that the Lake Arbor pool is not, and I'm sorry, you'll need help directing me to which system. I'm guessing it would be, yes, Dr. Janes. So the Lake Arbor pool has not been mentioned. I know we're waiting for estimates from Apex, I believe, on what that's going to cost to make those renovations that are needed. And so I just want to keep that on the radar as far as how we're thinking about where we might be able to pay for that and the timing of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. We are still waiting to hear from Apex's contractor about total cost. And then together, as partners, we're going to sit down at the table and kind of talk about what happens next,
right,
the timeline and the path forward from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Good, thanks. And then the other piece that I think is, we've been talking a lot about homelessness, and the Navigation Center is obviously going to be a significant investment on our behalf and our partners' behalf. And I know that up to this point, as I understand, the purchasing of the land, for example, we've done mostly with ARPA funds. Is that correct? Or
that is correct. That's
okay,
how we will pay for the purchase of the land, yes.
Correct. But as far as the next phase, once we get ready for the actual construction and so forth, we're going to be in need of looking for additional funds for that. Are we hopeful that we're going to get significant state and federal funds to move into that next phase, or are we going to need to be starting to really think how we're going to fund some of that from our city budget?
So, that was one of the things in Mr. Devon's budget letter that he acknowledged is having a funding gap. I will also tell you that those are regional housing programs, and so we're going to have to be working with our municipal and county partners to figure out the funding. There's also a development aspect piece in which a funding model may include things like LIHTC credits and those types of things and the ability to bridge the gap. But because we're such in the early stages of understanding what that model is, we're not exactly sure what grants we can apply for or what grants that we can apply for. So we need to come together as a community and as a region in order to understand the structure of what those models are going to look like. And from there, we will absolutely go over any funding source that we can get in order to fill that gap. But right now, I would say that we are in the very early stages of really understanding what that financial and operational model is going to look like in order to be strategic about the funding sources that we're going to be able to capture.
And what's your best guess on when we'll be having that conversation?
So my best guess of when we'll have that conversation is probably 2023, and my best guess for when we would have an operational navigation center that's funded by this partnership in Arvada would be 2025 or 2026.
Okay.
And I don't know if Mr. Devon wants to. Okay.
Great, thank you. And my last question, and again, I apologize for not remembering which system this falls in, but I believe we had a conversation about an environmental compliance officer, and I didn't hear that mentioned, so I just wanted clarification on, is that something that I missed or where that falls?
I'll field this one, Councilmember Mormon. The strategic result we're talking about is having an environmental compliance program. And so by building that program, first we're doing some assessments on where the needs are. And we're doing that before we actually establish an FTE.
Okay, so we're a year out, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would think at least a year out. We've got some interim milestones where we're looking internally again on where the priority needs are. And
Great.
of course, where the sustainability program goes.
Absolutely. All right,
Yeah.
thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thanks.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. So no question, but I'd like to make kind of a comment, and similar along the veins of Mr. Jones. I think this budget is good, and the team has done a great job of doing what we on City Council have asked you to do. However, I am troubled, or I'm worried about parts of this budget. You know, municipal government exists to do some basic things, things like streets and roads and water and sewer and parks, those basic things that we're to do. And this budget does those things. However, doesn't leave much room to do some of the other things that we're supposed to do, like improve our capital infrastructure over time. I'm particularly troubled in our inability to, we seem to be stuck for quite a long time in our inability to finish off 72nd Avenue west of Sims, which is kind of a glaring, to me, gap. But not just that, other things too. And whether it's directed by us on council or thrust upon us by a state legislature or even societal problems, where cities start taking on all these problems of social service problems and these unfunded mandates that hamper our police department, for instance, from doing their job, they suck up our ability to perform our core responsibilities. And so I think this particular budget has done a good job of trying to balance those things, but I'm very troubled with, given the trajectory of where this has gone in my time up here, in where we land another decade from now. That you know, I can see without some change in trajectory, cities are soon going to be unable at all to perform their core responsibilities, and instead we're going to be performing some of the core responsibilities of our fellow levels of government, like counties and like the state. And so I would hope, as we up here take the long view of things and look to that, we can keep in mind what it is we're actually here to do, doing those first and doing those to an excellent standard, and then, you know, pushing back against the things that are thrust upon us by a legislature or even by our constituents or society at large. So that's my comment.
Mr. Fiver?
You know, I know David brought up, like, you know, pushback on council. I viewed it a little bit different. I think that we just need to be aware of what's not going to make the list. If we make this decision, these are, you're going to have this on the shelf list of unfunded stuff. You just have to remind us on occasion that these things are just not going to get done. Not that you're pushing back, it's just making us aware that there's still a to-do list over time. And I think that we just need to be aware of that when we make those decisions. Then we can say, we went into this with our eyes wide open. Council decided to go that way, understanding that there's risk with other unfunded activities. As far as where this budget, I think it's one of the best ones, in my opinion. So I applaud you all, and here's why. I understand where Mr. Marriott's coming from, but I also know, being a government employee now, I think for those that have been in my journey, I've probably jumped 3 jobs since I've been here, from private sector to government employee and public servant. And the best job I ever had is becoming a public servant, hands down. One thing I don't think we realize coming from the private side or from small business or anything like that is we can't always do the work ourselves, so we have to contract it out. But when you contract it out, you always have to have a project manager. You have to have somebody oversight of that project. And your asks here are not outside of that realm. It is impossible for one person here to say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to pave 25 miles of road and it's all going to be in-house. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen by project managers or civil engineers or somebody you've hired to oversee a contractor who's going to do the 25 miles. That exhausts our resources. Because otherwise, it's the fox in the hen house. They're just going to spin up the bill, and there's no inspection. You cannot expect what you don't inspect. So if we don't have anyone there managing the projects or managing the inspection, we're going to have a lower quality product, and roads don't mean anything. I'm using roads as an example, as Don's staring at me. But that's just one example. But that facet can be applied to Sharon's team and to Ryan's team and to all these other groups. So I appreciate the fact that you're finally coming up in front of us, because for years and years and years, you never asked for one FTE. I mean, for like 10 years, you never asked for it. It's usually the police that we gave 1 or 2 to just get that, that churn. But the work system's never asked for any FTEs. So I applaud the fact that you are, because you realize there is work. We can't sustain it. We can't deliver. Even if I give you all the money in the world, you're not going to be able to deliver it because you don't have the resources internally. So I applaud the fact that you did it and that you did show. I did say, oh, this is quite a bit for a year. But the rationale is spot on. And I would have said you should have thrown in all the other ones. But I just, the 5 years I've been a public servant, I realize and understand the depth and breadth it takes for the remarkable unicorns you each have. You all have unicorns. And even though they say you're not supposed to look for them, but that's what you have. And when they're exhausted, they quit. And so we need to figure out some way to get on it. And so this budget is spot on in my eyes. And so I'm going to reflect for a minute, and I'm going back to honor Allard a little bit. There's no line item budget, so Brian.
I was going to bring that up.
Oh, sorry. The mayor would have done, but Brian, you failed, in Allard's eyes. But if you go back in the day of Runkle, who was
Vicky Runkle?
Vicky Runkle. That presentation to where it is today, just a reflection for those that have been here for a while, night and day. It's legible, it's understandable. The biggest success that government can do is put this type of complex information in a digestible format for our community to digest. And up here, I think my eyeballs were spinning the first few years, and Don's over, I was always pointing at Don over there, but Don Allard was sitting where John was, always demanding a line item budget, and he always said no every year on the budget voting. And the reason why is because it is complex. But you've made this book and this presentation spot on. And I appreciate the fact that all of you come up here and talk about your work unit, and even new faces or faces we know by email come up here and present. So every year it gets better and better, and I'm excited this year. So I can only look forward to what you can do next year around the budget, because it is night and day from what it was 5 years ago even. So I applaud y'all.
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. I think my colleagues have said most of it, so I won't repeat. I want to say thank you to the staff for all of your hard work. I know that this is a lot of intensive labor and working together, so congratulations to all of you for bringing it together. I echo Bob's point. I appreciate the simplicity, the clarity. I think that's important not only for us, but also for our residents. To Mr. Marriott's point, actually, I think he is spot on that we are always at risk of over-leveraging ourselves, of there being so much demand placed on us. Society is changing. Our residents are demanding more of their local government than ever before, but a lot of that is in response to the changes that are happening all around us. To Craig, I mean, supercomputers that are terrifying in the hands of foreign governments. I mean, but it's just an example of what's happening at large and how we're responding to it. And we do need to make sure the roads are paved. And so how do we relay that to our residents who also need to be safe, who also need to have clean drinking water as the world changes around them too? And that's when they turn to us, their leaders, to help them navigate those changes. So back to the point is, I think the simplicity of this is really, really important because it helps our residents see where the shortfalls can be and where the trade-offs are. I think there's this illusion sometimes that, we have all this money and we can wave a magic wand, we just need to do it, and why don't we? And those of us in this room know that's not true. And for every decision we make, there are ripple effects and consequences. So thank you guys for being cognizant of that and for all your hard work in trying to manage those on behalf of our residents in our city.
Yeah, Mr. Pfeiffer stole I was going to give everybody a ration that we don't have a line item budget, but it's a great budget. It's the secret sauce here for me. I agree with everything that's been said, but our devotion and adherence to the 10-year modeling is so important, because if we didn't do that, then I think that there would be the inclination to say, well, we've got some unfunded needs, let's go ahead and fund them now, and ignore what that does to us down the road. And we cannot do that. So I'm a firm believer in the 10-year modeling. I have great respect for our city team in terms of your integrity and your dedication to both, trying to get the most for your department, but as the chief clearly recognized, yes, he'd love to have every position filled, but at what cost to our other services in the city. And so I appreciate our city team's willingness to work with each other. I don't know what goes on behind the curtain, and probably don't want to know what goes on behind the curtain in terms of taking out each other's knees or whatever. But my belief is that you really do see the total team approach to this and see the overall vision of keeping Arvada the very special place that it is. So thank you, each and every one of you, for what you do and how you do it. And I'm really pleased with this. And Ms. Gillis, you're being handed a great team that's going to do a great job for you. Very good. Mr. Devon, anything else you have?
The next steps with the budget is we'll have the first reading introduced for your approval to put on for public hearing. That will occur on October 3rd, and then the public hearing will occur on October 17th. So that's actually already on the preliminary agenda for October 3rd. Our pay plan information and the family follow-up for that particular workshop. So I would just like to thank the City Council for your consideration of the information that was presented tonight. I would like, I so appreciate, the team appreciates the words that you all expressed, both in terms of appreciation for the work, the caution that Councilmember Marriott expressed in terms of the other issues that we're taking on, and I think that's apparent as well. what I would really like to say is, thank you to our team for putting the work together. As council knows, this is the last budget I will present to you, last budget I will present in my public service career. So I appreciate the fact that you received it so well, and I know Lori will look forward to executing on it and taking it from here.
Very good. Nothing else to come before us. We stand adjourned. Thank you.